So, you're probably wondering, Cartoon Manist, what took you so long to do these? Well, it's a simple answer. I literally have no time to do it. While I like to stay positive over many things, there are some duds here and there. As I'm sure a lot of you know, Thomas has been the biggest topic on my channel as of right now. For good reasons, of course. And while certain things have grown over the past few years on my channel, none have ever compared to the likes of Thomas. And as a lot of you know, the classic series is my favourite era of Thomas, from its charming narration, beautiful scenery, impressive model work, and its real life morals. However, it was very clear things started to dip after Magic Railroad. Until 2013, of course. But then to get after we got this bullshit. And while Thomas is my favourite thing in the whole wide world, it isn't without its flaws. And while I absolutely love the classic series, it isn't perfect. It's really close, but it does have its flaws. So today, I'm going to be counting down my top 5 picks for my least favourite episodes from the classic series. Why a top 5 instead of a top 10, you may ask? Well, for one thing, the classic series doesn't have that many bad episodes compared to the later eras. Hell, seasons 1 through 5 is near perfect. Sure, there aren't stinkers, but they're not awful. They're just meh. However, in season 6 and 7, it's a lot easier to occupy the bad episodes, and which ones are the worst. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Kicking up the list is Buffer Bother. Now, this is one of 2 episodes where I don't 100% hate it. But it's just so gosh darn boring. It's just Bill complaining about not getting new buffers instead of Ben, which is putting him off from his work. I never would have thought a 4.5-minute episode would drag out until now. Not helping is that they literally carbon copied Twin Trouble, which just so happens to be one of my favourite episodes from season 6. And by the end, he gets sent for new buffers anyway. Overall, this episode is not awful, but it's pretty bad nonetheless. Up next is Rusty Saves the Day. This has got to be the weirdest episode in the whole classic series. Scarlo and Ramirez's line becomes too expensive for Rusty to help with maintenance, so the Fat Controller just closes the entire railway down except for the slave mines? But what? The whole line? How does the whole fucking railway, that's based on the Tyleclear Railway in Wales, go from usable to such a horrible state? That's like the equivalent if Hexine shut down because of one of their students going missing. This is just an outright wrong episode in terms of continuity. Easily the most skippable episode in the series next to Buffer Bother. But if you thought those 2 episodes were bad enough, you haven't seen the worst of it yet. In third place is the first truly awful episode on this list, The Old Bridge. This is just so wrong to me. Scarlo's personality got so assassinated in this episode. And sadly, he wasn't the only one that had his character butchered. Renee's got it too with Renee's and the roller coaster, as did Duncan and Trusty Rusty. Like, how did 2022 me think that Renee's on the roller coaster was my favourite season 7 episode? I'm sorry, but after seeing Usual Bloke Luke's season 7 review, I take back everything I said about the episode in my best classic series episodes review. But anyway, back to The Old Bridge. Now, this episode would have worked if it took place during Scarlo and Ramirez's younger years. But since the Fat Controller and Peter Sam are there, it doesn't, making this episode completely wrong. But there's one thing I like about this episode. It's that Rhaenyra and Scarlo's brotherly bond is still intact, despite both of their regressions. And the music in the US dub of this episode is actually not that bad. But I'll still prefer the original Micah Jr. music. But aside from the one good thing I mentioned, this episode was just awful. But not as awful as the number 2 spot. What's the matter with Henry? This episode has the exact same problem as the last episode we just covered. Thomas and Percy are so out of character in this episode. I could totally see where Trevor Davis was coming from in his worst classic series episodes review. I mean, Henry is fucking ill. Being ill is no laughing matter. I mean, for fuck's sake, Henry told Thomas up front that he was ill. And Thomas and Percy giving Henry way too much drugs to pull on his own was just so cruel. Thomas 1 Edward 2 Henry 3 said it best in his worst classic series episodes video.
What they did was like leaving a person in a wheelchair to climb up the stairs.
And that's exactly what's going on here. But there's one thing that I like about this episode, is that I like Henry's determination to pull all those trucks. And I do like how Emily was handled in this episode, even if she was still on the bland side in this season. But that's the only thing I like about this episode. This episode is just an absolute chore of an episode to sit through. And it is my pick for the worst episode of Season 7. But let me tell you, that ain't nothing compared to this last episode. My pick for the absolute worst episode of the whole classic series goes to none other than Middle Engine. Oh my god, where to start with this episode? Oh wait, I know.
"Help!" cried Percy. "I'm not a truck!" But no one heard him. Percy was hoisted up.
Why does this episode have to be unrealistic? Oh, the fans say Water is unrealistic, and you love Water. Shut up. I could like whatever I like, okay? If you thought Rusty Saves the Day was done in the wrong way, that's nothing compared to this shit. First off, Arya and Bert have been downgraded drastically, going from the devilishly brutes they were in Season 5 intending to kill Stepney, and Fergus in Season 7, mind you, to just generic bullies. Honestly, as much as I love the world's strongest engine, Diesel is just kind of a fool in that episode. But what makes this episode incredibly frustrating to watch is the scene where, for some baffling reason, the Fat Controller tells off Percy for something that was completely out of his control.
"I'm very disappointed in you, Percy," he said. "You know it's against the rules to go on the tipper's loading ramp. You will shunt trucks in the yard until I can get to the bottom of this."
Like, why? It'd be one thing if you blamed Harry and Bert, but putting all the blame on Percy? This is like that moment in the lawsuit arc where Maggie caused something that was completely out of her control. But at least I can actually sit through the lawsuit arc without getting frustrated. This episode could rot in hell for all I care. And not even James's moments and Michelangelo's energetic narration can save it. It is by far the worst episode in the whole classic era. Fuck this episode big time. But we're only just getting started. We have so much badness to come these next couple of days. And hopefully, I can survive it all. This is gonna be one bumpy ride.